Hi everyone, welcome back to another episode of the Project Flux podcast. Today on the spotlight we have Angelos Nicolaou, the CEO of Sector. Thank you so much for coming on the show and spending some of your very valuable time with us, Angelos.
Thanks for inviting us. It's such a pleasure to be here with you, James, and Yoshi.
Brilliant. And we met quite a while ago now. It was back in last year, wasn't it, at the Digital Construction Week? So it's been a long time in the works, this episode. So I really am delighted to have you on, Angelos.
Absolutely, yeah.
Listen, we always like to start by just asking a very open question, really, because the space is moving so fast, both kind of within tech and specifically within AI. What's the thing on your mind at the moment, the thought or the problem that you keep coming back to, say, at 2 a.m.?
That's a great question. The thing that's on my mind is that I hate change management. I think everybody hates change management. And the thought that wakes me up at 2 a.m. is that technology should be doing the work for us.
Yeah.
People don't have time to change. People don't have time for change management. So that's the thing that's occupying my mind. How do we solve that problem?
Yeah, and that's a species problem. You know, human beings just hate change. And I think the secret to it is making it feel like it's not a change. And if you can get rid of that friction somehow, but it's very, very difficult because things are moving so quickly. It's always going to feel like a change. So how do you within Sector kind of manage that process to make it as frictionless as possible?
Yeah, I honestly think it's a matter of getting the technology to work for the end user instead of the user having to work for the technology. And we saw a lot of decisions in the past being made from companies where they, the C-suite would sit together and they see a software and the software looked amazing and then they made that decision and they bought it and then everybody, you have to use this software. It doesn't really work it's proven not to work well that way. James, what I like about AI and agentic AI in particular is that I feel that for the first time, we're seeing those leaps in productivity that we were promised for the last 20, 30 years. We're seeing them for the first time now.
Yeah, super exciting.
Yeah, that's it. What Sector does is the connection of the knowledge of the software that we have with your internal knowledge and making sure that the two are aligned so that we can achieve that goal of making the tech work for you. And if there's gaps in the tech, then you'd get a recommendation, a suggestion that, hey, there's something out there that could be helping you.
I think it's an incredibly valuable service because it is overwhelming out there, and just you could spend months just trying to work out everything that's out there, and then by the time you get to the end of that process, it's all changed again because there's more and more startups coming on the block. So for someone like yourselves, keeping your finger on the pulse, knowing what's out there and being able to recommend effectively a stack to people that they can rely on is a really, really valuable proposition, I think.
And we do that for free, and we do that completely for free. And here, do you know how many apps there are in the construction tech space? 10,000.
Right, let's have a guess. Oh God, I wanted to have a guess.
10,000. James,
I don't think I would have guessed that many.
10,000 apps in the construction tech space. Prop tech is another 30,000. That's the stuff your clients want. Yeah. Your clients want that, 30,000. And then what you can use is 40,000 apps is your decision pool, let's say, that you have
incredible.
to pick.
That is overwhelming.
It's insane.
But Angelos, you said change, right? Change management is difficult. And when I look at change management, or at least change, there's two different avenues, right? One is active change, which I would say should be met with more friction because you have to change the way you do things and be active within that, actively change your process and your workflows. But then there's passive change, right? Which change that can happen, like you said, you should let the technology do the work for you. The thing that I always find interesting within the AI space is when there is friction with change, people seem to actually show more friction when there's passive change, because passive change is almost like automation. If we have the technology doing the work for us, it should automate a lot of our processes. So we shouldn't actually have to do much more. Whereas people want AI for augmentation. But the funny thing there is augmentation actually means you have to actively change. So there's two differences. I don't think we've quite worked it out. So I don't know, is it a question of people don't want to do more work to change the way they work? Or is it actually there's another fear, right, which is the whole displacement piece? Because if things become automated, well, I've not got a job anymore.
I think people should not need to do more work. Technology should be removing work from people, and especially the mundane, let's say, monkey work that we do, robotic work that we do, day in and day out. We spend 50, 70% of our day looking for information. We really shouldn't be doing that. We look at
the grunt work.
The grunt work, right? We look at we look at a Power BI chart, and then and it's great. It gives you that at a glance, looks great, and then your mind starts question after question, and then you spend hours and hours looking for the thing you were looking for in the first place. So that those are the processes that we like to see removed, so that we just make people's lives effortlessly easier. I would say, right, without them having to put an extra effort learning the technology. They should just get it.
Yeah. And, most people want to be creative. They want to produce things. They don't want to be spending time moving a bunch of data from one spreadsheet to another, or, doing a load of research, or trying to find a file that they put away a year ago. That's not fulfilling for anyone. So the great promise for me of AI is getting rid of that stuff, so we can concentrate on feeling fulfilled when we come to work and when we go to work and whatever we do. But what's interesting about your background, Angelos, because you've built and exited a few businesses, and you also experienced in blockchain, and you've gone into ad tech. Is there a thread that connects all these with what's happening in AI? Can you see what's coming next from your experiences in those technologies?
I think AI is, since the dawn of the internet, I think it's the first technology that is actually the next big thing. And I'm seeing it not just theoretically. It's not just people saying it's the next big thing. It's the speed of adoption of AI that we're seeing, right? And the truth is in the data. It took Facebook, I think, 12 months to get to 1 million users. It took Instagram a month to get to 1 million users. It took ChatGPT 5 days to get to 1 million users. It's intuitive. People get it. It's very helpful. And I think that's the key of a really useful technology that can increase our productivity. I'm always going to keep going back to that, because that's a pain point, right? That's a pain point we really need to solve.
It is, absolutely.
I think the AI helps us get our jobs done. And it's not something that's happening on the side. And Yoshi, going back to, to what you said about change management, there's tech that we sort of lives on the side, or we, have to go the extra step to fill in that form or something for, future, or our boss, analyzing data, or something that doesn't, necessarily benefit us. What we're seeing with most AI tools out there today is that it helps us get our jobs done, easier. I would just, if you told me to choose one word, I'd say just easier.
Yeah, exactly. Taking away the grunt work, as we say. Yeah. So can you walk us through some of the most impactful categories of AI you're seeing? Like, is there a particular type? Is it reality capture or scheduling or cost? Is there something that's really capturing the imagination at the moment?
I think it's Agentic AI right now that's capturing the imagination, right? Agentic is an interesting subject because, what is an agent? I would define an agent as when AI does the work for you. It's something that I used to do, it's an action, right? I used to, open my email, read through my calendar, and then, sort of schedule my day the way I wanted to schedule it. If now I have an agent doing that, then that's what I consider to be agentic AI. But I think that's what captures the imagination. Like you said, James, and I love it, you said, the grunt work. So it's all this, and how much of that do we have in construction? How much, much. Oh my gosh, like how much do we have, downloading from Autodesk and uploading into Aconex, downloading from Aconex and, uploading into Think Project, or, whatever, XYZ client wants and whatever XYZ tool we use. And then we have to, employ people just do that unfulfilling job, like you said, not feeling smart doing that.
Because it is just like 80% of, I reckon 70 to 80% of a person's day is spent doing this kind of grunt stuff that all that does, it takes them to the point that they can then do what they actually wanted to do. Like, let's take a cost report as an example. You could, because I come from a cost background, so I remember this. You'd spend maybe a couple of days pulling all the information together from all these various sources, putting it into the report so that you come up with an answer, and then it will be like an hour sitting with a client going through the outcomes to make some decisions. None of that. The client doesn't care about all that stuff that happened before. What he wants is, well, what's the position and what's your advice? So we can get to that bit quicker, right?
100%. And that's what really captures the imagination. It's when you were used to doing one thing, something especially that you hated to do, and all of a sudden the solution is just there, and it's just there in seconds too. It's not that, oh my gosh, I have to, how do I do this? Oh, I have to outsource to this, I don't know, Accenture, go pay them 10 million pounds or whatever, deploy a team. They're going to, endless workshops, then training. It's just like, it's done.
Yeah.
Beautiful.
So would you, for like the lay listener who you've heard a lot about agents, how would they differ from like ChatGPT or Copilot? Is it the fact that it executes on an action at the end of that process?
Yeah, it's basically, think of it as a robot. It's doing something that you used to do. And instead you have, this robot doing the thing for you. If, I don't know, you were used to, I don't know, pouring milk in your coffee, you just, press a button. It's like, all right, as soon as my coffee's done, open the fridge and pour the milk in the that's it. That's how I think of an agent.
I think for some people it's extremely exciting, and I know Yoshi, you got a lot of thoughts on this as well. But for some people, this is where it becomes a bit of a threat. So I think a lot of people who are skeptics, they could accept a passive AI chatbot because it's if they were basically using it as a glorified Google, which is not the right way of using it, but that's what they were using it for. So they could accept that. They felt they had full control over it. I think for some people, they get very, very scared when you're handing off responsibilities for an AI to actually execute on a task. What would you say to those people who are worried and thinking this has gone too far now?
Well, look, I mean, the story of humans is a story of evolution. I think we have a lot more talents than we give ourselves credit for, a lot more creativity that is lost in operational work that should really just be automated. Just because you were used to doing one thing, it doesn't mean that that's the thing you were meant to be doing. And I would look at this as an opportunity to grow and learn and expand. And, the pie is growing, right? It's not, it's not that, AI is taking, I mean, look at construction. Let's simplify things. Look at construction. We're worried that AI will take our jobs. We can't hire people fast enough. We can't build fast enough because we can't hire people.
It's so true.
It's a solution. It's a solution.
But people love that discussion. I think there's a hidden part of some people who like that because they feel like they're a scarce resource, and they kind of protect that because they feel safe because they know they're scarce. So even though that's absolutely true, a lot of people are played on that because then they can say, well, I'm a scarce resource. It helps with negotiations and pay. It helps with their feeling of worth in life. When all of a sudden they're competing against an agent, it makes it very difficult. And people love the comfort of routine,
James, let me give you an example of a document controller. A document controller before AI agents would have to do this manual task that we just said, download from one, upload on the other, make sure it's all checked.
Yeah.
I'm seeing document controllers today sort of rise the ranks to become these superstar construction tech experts who are the ones who truly understand the software and are the ones that are leading the agents that, oh my gosh, can I do this thing? And can I do that thing? And can I do the other thing? And these are the people who used to not even be involved in the conversations that we had with our clients 2-3 years ago, who now are part of every single meeting, making decisions on what solutions do they buy, what solutions are the most friendly for the people. It's just it's a different game, but I think
it's a huge opportunity. I see
huge opportunity. Yeah. This knowledge that they have should really not be underestimated. I ask myself many times this question. Is it should I learn less? I love reading. Should I learn less now that we have ChatGPT? And I mean, why read if I just ask the question? I think we should learn more, use the agents to our advantage to do our work for us so that we can learn more, so that we can better direct the agents to do even better work for us.
It's our superpower. And the way I look at it, not because I like reading as well, but whereas before, if let's say you're reading a relatively mediocre book, and you're not really enjoying it, but you know, it's like you want to get to the end, see if it improves. What you can use it for is like say, well, I'm not going to waste my time reading the rest of that book. I'm going to use ChatGPT to give me a summary of it to help me make a decision whether to continue reading or not. That's, you saved yourself, you can move on to something else. So things like that are like real use cases that I see myself using it for.
Yeah,
I've dumped a whole load of stuff that I would have wasted time on. I'm like, no, I've just done the summary of that. It doesn't tell me anything. I'm not going to continue with it. And I think people should be better at, say, just dumping stuff when it's not giving you any value, because we can now.
I think people don't know. People don't know what they can use, AI and ChatGPT for. That's what I think is our job. That's how I see our position is opening people's eyes to the possibilities of this.
Yeah, that's why we do this. Sorry, Yoshi, you were going to say something.
No, I think you've raised a few good points, James. I mean, I definitely agree with you when you mentioned one thing that stuck to me when you said that people who believe they're a scarce resource, it allows them to better negotiate certain prices, but it can be their downfall because we find other solutions, and this is where the AI space has come up. But Angelos, when you mentioned document control, I find that quite interesting, because what we do with an AI, and I know Greg Lawton speaks to this a bit, is that it allows us to create paperwork and contractual information very quickly, and we use that for things like our resilience. But then when it comes to actually communicating with people and getting things done, people don't typically actually read the whole report. They just want the information now and then. So there is that dual benefit. But what I would say, when you use ChatGPT to help you create and also analyze and read documents, it won't always have the same lens that you would when you're reading it. So James, if you like to read a book in a certain way and you keep an eye out for certain things in that book, right? I don't know, you like first principles and you really stick to where they go into detail. But then ChatGPT gives you an abstraction, a general overlook. It might not translate the things you're looking for in the book, so you overlook it and then you just put the book down. So there is that risk with it.
It's a balance.
It's a balance. So Angelos, on that kind of front then, where we can see that, that abstraction isn't always what you want, where do you see agentic workflows currently falling down?
So I think this is a really good point, right? And a good example that we can bring up is using ChatGPT, for instance, to kickstart ideas. When you really don't have any ideas, it's kind of like a bicycle. The hardest parts of riding the bicycle is when you're stopped at a red light and you're just starting, or when you're going uphill. And a lot of times, it's quite tempting to use ChatGPT. I would say, I don't have an idea at all. I'm having these thoughts. I have no idea. What do you think about this? And then it sort of, kickstarts the idea for you.
Yeah, it gets rid of writer's block sometimes.
Yeah, it is quite tempting. Where I see it fall down sometimes is that, if ChatGPT is kickstarting the idea for me and 1,000 other people, then it sort of, it took away that human creativity part that, these 1,000 people would have a different way of looking at it. I think these are things that will naturally take their course. There's nothing we can do about that. We can't stop it or stop people from doing it. But I'd go back to what we said is, increase your knowledge, read the books. I have a rule of always finishing the book, James. It's just a rule of mine. It's just a rule of mine. Whether I like it or not, I made that decision. And hopefully it leads to a better decision with the next book. But that's my rule. But yeah, I would say I try to make an effort not to use ChatGPT to kickstart the idea from scratch. If I have an idea, I love bouncing ideas back and forth, sort of brainstorming with AI. But I definitely wouldn't, or I definitely try not to have it kickstart the idea, because I find the responses being pretty standard. That's where I see it falling down here.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point, because it speaks to the question of, can AI be truly creative, or is it literally just regurgitating someone else's idea? And we've had a few sort of very creative people on the show. A friend of the show, Dave Officer, who's a graphic designer, says exactly the same as you, Angelos. Never always get it from the human brain and then converse with an AI to maybe flesh it out a little bit. But I think even that's starting to change. There was a really good prompt you gave me, Yoshi, which was it was something along the lines of, tell me one unique thing about myself that I don't know. Do you remember that prompt that you gave me? And that came up with some really unique insights. I think it's always to do with the power of the prompt. You can actually get it to be quite creative, but you've got to be very specific about what you want it to do, and you've got to tell it to be creative and think outside the box.
Yeah. So what I would say is when you go to an AI and you want to understand a topic, ideally what you have an AI through its custom instructions is get it to understand who you are and how you like to learn, how you like to think. Because then when you then start to probe into different topics, it can use certain frameworks, like it can use a systems perspective, if you like, consuming information in that way to think about a topic. And because you're already thinking that way, you're then connecting the dots of what you already know. Whereas if it's a generic chat GPT prompt, it's just going to give it to you in a way which it thinks people typically like to consume information.
Yeah. It's really interesting when you use something like deep research in ChatGPT, and you can click on the details button, you can see what ChatGPT is thinking.
Yeah, I love that. That's even better in DeepSeek, by the way. In DeepSeek, it goes into absolute detail.
Oh, I love it.
Absolute detail. I agree with you, James. And when you look at that, it sort of gave me insights into how the AI agents are thinking. For instance, I asked ChatGPT something about my business, and I saw in the details that I tried to ask it objectively, but I saw something in the details that made me question the answer. It said the user might be the owner of the business, and he might be sensitive on my response.
I love that.
And I was like, wait a minute. I don't want cuddling here. I just want the truth.
Yeah.
So that was mind blowing when I read that. Okay, I really do want that objective response. So all you have to do is prompt it. And Yoshi, like you say, prompting and prompt engineering, I think is huge. Perhaps it's big now, but it's one of those things again when I feel it's probably going to go away. It will be probably auto prompting based on your behavior.
That's already starting to happen, isn't it?
Yeah, and it's funny you mentioned that, Angelos, because this was the whole sycophancy angle with the GPT 4.0, is that it was, and I think James, you covered it in the newsletter, glazing behavior. It would just typically be overly sensitive to the user.
That's what Sam Altman said, wasn't it?
Yeah, it's overly sensitive to the user. This was about the last few weeks, and they've slowly started to temper it. But the way to get around it was in the prompt, and it was, and one key word people kept saying was, treat me as if I am a startup founder in a Y Combinator-like environment. And then it would somehow break through. I don't know because that's Sam's background, right? And it would be treating it with complete honesty. But there is this element of glazing that we need to get around for sure.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah.
Right, let's move on to, I wanted to touch on business development teams, right? Because one of the big things we hear a lot about, Angelos, is innovation is the big differentiator. So if you take any kind of construction company, whether it's a contractor or an architect, or, they'll be fundamentally the same in terms of what they deliver. Similar people, we get this merry-go-round of people going from one company to another. So people are starting to say, well, innovation is becoming the major differentiator for major bids. So how is that actually starting to reshape the role of, say, BD teams? And is it really a differentiator when everyone's saying that? And how can you, let's say we've got someone listening from a BD team now, how can they truly stand out rather than just using the word that we innovate? Because everyone says they innovate.
Yeah, everyone says they innovate. Most companies use some program or other that is give or take the same, like Android versus iPhone kind of thing.
It's true.
I think the key in, first of all, when we look at the bids, one of the key problems that we need to solve is the complete disconnection between the tendering teams and the project management teams. They'll put something in there, the project manager doesn't even know about it, was never consulted, the project starts, 3 months in, hey, what happened to that software we promised? Oh, yeah, I guess we have to go in and sign the contract and get started. So it's quite important to have that knowledge, make sure the tendering teams are up to date and also talking to each other. That's, as a matter of fact, that's something that we here at Sector do completely automatically. But I think what truly differentiates one company from the other is the results, the value that they communicate in their bids. So for instance, if you're saying, I use OpenSpace and another consultant says I use OpenSpace, what truly differentiates you is how you use OpenSpace.
Yes.
I use OpenSpace and I produce 30% more quality control inspections per month. I use OpenSpace and I reduced my travel by 50%. And by the way, here are 10 projects where I did it. These are the things that make the decision maker, your client, understand, how you're truly different.
So are you saying the edge? So are you saying that the edge sits in how well you actually use the tools then?
Adopted, absolutely. The edge is adoption, 100%.
Yeah, and I think also people can, when it's genuine and real, I think people can sniff out BS because a lot of people will say they're doing it, but when you talk about a real case study, you can feel it, can't you? You can feel, okay, that person's excited. They're talking about details that you wouldn't be able to sort of manufacture. And a good example of that is Copilot, right? So a lot of people are experimenting with Copilot, and it's like you could have two companies both saying, "Oh, we innovate because we've rolled out Copilot." You could have one company, and I know this is true, who rolled out Copilot, spent an awful lot of money on it, and didn't do any kind of training or any kind of onboarding with it at all. Adoption 1%. Yeah. Another company who rolled it out in small waves, got champions on board, really kind of built it into the psyche of the company, 80% adoption. And so those are two different stories. They could both say we're innovating, but they're two totally different ways of innovating, right?
Innovation is not a tick in the box anymore. I think it used to be, but it's really not anymore because there's so many solutions out there. Tech vendors, tech companies have found ways to get to the owners as well. So now the owners are aware. So, if you're going in and saying, hey, I deployed Copilot, is not something like, oh my gosh, what is this guy talking about? It's like they know, they probably use it too. And they'll start judging you. How are you using Copilot? Yeah. Are you using him for this? And then the minute you start breaking down, it's, you lost it.
Yeah, you can kind of crack it. And this is something that I also hear as well, because when you deploy an AI-based solution, typically with large language models in your organization, when you look at them, you try to understand operational efficiencies or like ROI. And if you go anything beyond 20 to 30%, people kind of raise their eyebrows. Yeah, but I mean, if you can ever, because people say, it sits between 5 and 20%, right? Efficiency. But then if you can justify that you actually do that, that's powerful, but it just seems unrealistic.
Yeah. McKinsey says that technology can increase your productivity by up to 25%, which I think is realistic, Yoshi. I think it was a lot harder to show this before AI. Now with AI, it's pretty real. I mean, it's not some efficiency gain that we have in the background. It's an efficiency gain that we have here and now. We need to hire less document controllers. We need to we can produce 30% more inspections or whatever. So it has become very real. I think the key in communication is talking about the results, the value that you're bringing your client. Look, there's two pain points when you're buying a technology. Really, there's always only two. The first one is the cost to purchase the solution. That's the money that you paid that came out of your pocket, £1 million a year. You pay $1 million to Salesforce, for instance. It's painful. And then it doesn't matter, by the way, if you're doing 10 billion in turnover. That anytime money leaves your pocket, goes someone else, it hurts.
Of course.
The second pain point is the cost to operate that solution. And sometimes we know the cost, and sometimes we don't know the cost. And then we see it and we freak out. Oh my gosh, like I've been spending £3 million a year operating Salesforce, and then you freak out. So when technology, let's say software, goes to our clients and say, hey, you're by buying this solution, you're going to see 10x ROI, 100x ROI, 100 million x ROI, whatever. We say, let's first focus on recovering the cost that you paid for the tech. First and foremost, let's realistically look at the total cost of ownership of this technology. Let's look at what the licenses cost you. Let's look at what it costs you to operate and maintain this platform. Let's make sure that at the very least, you're making that money back. Then, you're free. Go make 10x, 100x, a trillion x. But let's solve that initial pain point.
Yeah, and that's the doing it in steps, isn't it? Rather than promising the earth and then falling short, you're doing it slowly. Because then there's soft benefits. Even if you make it pay for itself, the soft benefits of introducing this tech, obviously it helps with recruitment, it helps with image, it helps with kind of data security, all these kind of things. So I think that is the correct way of doing it. It's where I've seen the best examples of good adoption, is where you go step by step. what you just kind of described, Angelos. Can I just ask a question about, because you deal with a lot of SaaS software and software companies. Now, there's a lot of going on in the, is it still called the Twitter sphere? I guess it's called the X sphere now, isn't it? There's a lot of going on about vibe coding, right? With these apps like Lovable and Replit, where you can basically start knocking up a relatively good app without any coding ability. And it's led some people to say SaaS is dead. Do you believe that? Do you think this SaaS coding, vibe coding is a bit of a flash in the pan, or do you think it is going to start changing how people procure SaaS software in the future?
I do think SaaS is changing.
Yeah.
I wouldn't call it dead quite yet, but I do think SaaS is changing. First of all, we're seeing a lot of tech-enabled services come to the space. It's not pure SaaS. I think there's SaaS saturation for sure. Something that we see is that our customers, it's not unrealistic or unheard of for a customer of ours to have 450 different SaaS product subscriptions on a per user basis, each user using more than 12 to 13 apps per day to do their job. So, and by the way, think of the productivity loss of switching between all these apps. So there is certainly some saturation happening there. Do I think SaaS is dead? No, I don't think SaaS is dead. I think SaaS is here to stay for a long time. What I think we will start seeing is, SaaS is, starting to take verticals very, very seriously. I think that we might have, today we have project management solutions, for the entire world. Tomorrow we might have, because it's easier to launch it, a project management solution for London, for Manchester, for San Francisco,
so it's going
for
to
New York.
Down.
Yeah. So the question is, who is going to be the one who's going to launch these solutions? Now, if you operate in 10 different countries, you might have 10 different project management platforms, one for each country, because, that's the one that works there. It was specifically designed. The question is, who is the one who's going to launch these solutions? Will it be or Autodesk? That's, I think, what we don't know yet.
It is exciting. I think it will change. Like you say, it's just an evolution. But I do think the vibe coding thing will allow people sometimes people have got no choice but to use a sledgehammer to crack a nut. They might want a very, very small part of a SaaS software, and they have to buy the whole suite to be able to do something quite small. The ability to be able to spin up an app for a very small, narrow task might necessitate or get rid of the need to buy that SaaS software. So I do think it's going to have an impact for that, where people are going to become more confident in spinning up their own little apps. But I guess it remains
small impact. I think it's small impact.
Yeah.
I think it also depends on the because in any development that you do or any solution that you do, you're effectively buying a container, a software which allows you to better manipulate data. Right. Yeah. So if you're vibe coding and you're tackling a specific pain point, and you've then managed to convert nothingness or data into information, that in itself was useful. So I think, because when you have many different vertical tools, they do have a place in the fact that they're trying to solve a specific pain point. And then the big boys come in with the economies of scale, and then they just build this panacea which can just solve many different problems. But I think if you can build solutions like single point solutions on a single project, and you have an outcome, you plug that data into your data lake, for instance, and then you've captured all of it, it's still useful. There's utility. Absolutely. I think it's when you have things which fragmented and you can't fix.
That'd be beautiful. And I think that's where it's headed. If you ask me where is this headed, is more and more tools, which I think is why it's so important to make sure that we have the structure in place to stay organized, stay compliant, and make sure we don't add additional burden to the teams. While I know knowledge bases and centers of excellence get a lot of have a bad rep about them because nobody uses them, they're outdated, whatever. But I think there's some hidden diamonds in that documentation.
Yeah.
And I see it as our job to sort of surface it, no matter what solution you use. When you look at the centers of excellence of large enterprises, someone spent a lot of time reading, thinking, designing, testing. These are tried and tested methods. Then we buy new software and all of a sudden it's outdated. It doesn't mean we have to lose all of that knowledge, start completely from scratch. Just because I bought a new car, it doesn't mean I have to learn how to drive from scratch. I'm taking my knowledge.
Although a lot of listeners to the podcast, there's a running joke going about my driving, so probably I should do. I should use the opportunity. It's not great.
I didn't pick up on that.
No. So, Angelos, because you mentioned a good point that there is often or sometimes a discrepancy between the tendering team and then also the project management team, so the guys on the floor. And there might be the need to or necessitate the use of a certain software or tool in the tender, but then it was never then translated, and then it was never then used on the project, or it wasn't used at the start. So on that, then, what are your thoughts to innovation teams? Because we've had a guest on here before which say you should just give some of the agency or the option to the project teams themselves to be able to go and procure technology themselves, because they're going to be using it. And then on that basis, why would you need the use for an innovation team? On the other hand, you'd say the innovation team will understand, the IT systems, they understand the technical need, they know the limitations of AI. Where do you think there's a nice balance in that?
First of all, I think innovation teams are both undervalued in the business and overwhelmed at the same time. They are super busy, and they're not valued nearly enough for the amount of value they generate for a business. They're the key differentiator. They help drive adoption of these tools. They help drive ROI. They are sometimes the only ones who truly know what's going on in terms of tech, all the tools that we have, all the solutions that we have. I think innovation teams need tools. Companies like Sector need to start, that's why I'm proud to say we have started building tool solutions for them that help them do their job a lot easier, which is, to connect the dots to make sure they're always up to speed. If there's some sort of, especially for a large organization like yours, if you have a team in Peru testing a software that, you could be benefiting from here in the UK or, in India, your innovation team really ought to know about that and start to include that in their bids and their proposals. And that should be communicated with the project manager. And then they need help. And then I think when it really starts to fall apart, Yossi, is when we start the construction phase, all of this, the beautiful tech stack, the innovation that we put together needs to be translated into the everyday workflows that our people are doing. Yeah. So if we're launching Copilot, we need to have those processes ready from the get-go. So the day we start is the day we start adopting Copilot on that project. Otherwise, if we started doing something, like we said, we spoke about change earlier. If we started doing something in a different way, pen and paper, it's almost impossible. It doesn't matter how inefficient that way is. It is almost impossible to change it. Yeah, almost.
Angelos, we're coming towards the end of the podcast, so we like to do a few sort of questions about you, if that's okay, before we wrap up. So,
the uncomfortable moment.
The uncomfortable. No, we're genuinely interested in some of these questions, actually. So what's something that you've learned recently that has genuinely surprised you?
I read a book called The Inner Game of Tennis, which I read in the very average to bad paddle player. And I keep trying to improve my game. It's very hard. For me. But this is a book that I saw in the past. I was like, I don't play tennis. I don't need to read this. And then I saw it again in the bookstore. It's a 50th anniversary of this book, and it's afforded by Bill Gates. And I'm reading this book, and it's talking about the importance of focus and presence and the need to be here and now. I think this is something, because we're so overwhelmed with technology, and I'm saying it as someone who's the active promoter, the active evangelist of technology. I see it as my life's purpose. It's really, truly surprised me to read that we really should be focusing on, staying present, in the here, in the now, understanding, what's going on around us, being conscious about the world around us. I think that can really take a lot of those fears of, oh my gosh, AI is going to take over my life. I'm going to lose my job, and will help unlock that creativity that we need to get better and improve.
That sounds like an awesome book. So it's not actually about tennis. It's the analogy of tennis and life.
Yeah, there's some tennis tips here. So I'm going to try to use them at paddle. And when we do this podcast again, I'll let you know.
Well, we need a benchmark. Where are you now? And we'll see if it's got any better.
I'm Platonic level 3. So let's see. Let's hope we increase.
But I think it does touch on a really important point, is that it is overwhelming at the moment with the way that you can communicate and the amount of different modes of communication, text, WhatsApp, Zoom, etc., that you're never truly present. You're rushing from one thing to another. Yeah. So whilst we talk about the great hope of AI, circling back to what we talked about at the beginning, the great hope of AI is it frees us up a bit, not necessarily not to do work, but to get more thinking time, so we can be more present to make better decisions for our companies and for ourselves. So it is quite an important point, because it is the other side of the coin when we look at tech. We are all far too busy and not spending nearly enough time just being in the moment.
It's the antimatter that's just as important
Yes.
To keep the world operating the way that it does.
Couldn't agree more. Angelos, thank you so much for coming on. Where can people find out more about you and more about Sector before we finish?
LinkedIn is the best place to find out more about us. You can connect with me on LinkedIn. And we're launching our new website, Sector AI, very soon.
Sector.ai, is it? Or
Sector.ai? Sector.ai very soon, which you will have access to. We'll make an announcement on that as well.
Brilliant. Well, thank you so much for coming on. I think what you do is a really valuable service. Like I say, there's so much overwhelm at the moment, and you kind of help people decipher through that. So we're very grateful for what you do and for your passion, clear passion in what AI has the promise of delivering. So thank you so much. And we do hope you'll come back on another time to, number one, tell us progress about what's happening in the sector, but more importantly, how your paddle's getting on.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, thank you very much for having us. We really appreciate it. It was a lot of fun. I have to say, I had a lot of fun doing this.
Brilliant. Thank you.